gonna be a he for she on the couch session on gender roles and breaking stereotypes. So first off, let us thank ANZPH Women's Network for their efforts in setting up, special programs like this as we continue to celebrate the season of strong women following the International Women's Day last March 8th. So this is going to be yet another learning experience for everyone, so sit back and relax. So you might be asking, what is Gender Bender? Why are we even here? And what are we going to talk about? So basically, if you can remember, if some of you were here, we had a session a few days ago with the ambassador and also with Steve. But we touched, the discussion revolved more on the campaign theme for this year, which is hashtag Press for Progress. Now, we're gonna go deeper into that. We're gonna focus more on gender biases and typecasting, stereotyping, and that's and we've invited 4 influencers that would be teaching us on how we are able to challenge these gender norms and also show that we will all win when we lean together. So to start off, I will call on ANZPH Women's Network's lead male champion and transitions manager, Fedoy.
Good afternoon. Just in case you're wondering, we only have 3 seats. I'm the 4th one. But Milo will be joining me later in co-facilitating the discussion. First off, good afternoon. All right. Thank you for joining us today. I know it's a busy month, busy day for most. As Milo mentioned, yes, I'm here as the lead male champion of change, and yes, a member of the ANZPH Women's Network. To kick off the forum, I'll share you a story. I'll tell a story where when I was voluntold that I will not mention names, and Janice Alguero, I was voluntold to actually be the lead male champion of change. Initial reaction, of course, is, well, I was honored, right? Flattered. But when it sank in, I was like, what does that even mean? Yeah. So, probably a few weeks after knowing that I am in the role, I got an invite, I think from Marjo, and coming from the CS team, that we're gonna have a meeting with Catherine of TCSS. Primarily talk about the CS initiatives, the diversity programs we have in the organization, and at the same time, talk about the plans for this year. Then came restless nights, sleepless nights, and Kia, you know this, I was very nervous. I did not know what to do, what to say. I Googled, I researched, I read a lot of articles, and although it made a lot of sense, majority of them took an academic approach in tackling, I guess, the topic of gender inclusiveness and the movement for women, right? Until one night, I got a message from a friend whom I asked for help and said, Women's Network, I'm gonna speak in Filipino. I'll translate it for you, Steve. Women's Network, bakit? Pambabae lang yan. Translate? Really? Women's Network? Isn't that for women only? It's a women-only club. And that was the time that it dawned on me, and I guess fully accepted the role of a lead male champion of change. In this year's theme of International Women's Day, hashtag Press for Progress, one of the commitments being asked is around influencing people's belief and actions, and at the same time breaking stereotypes. And hopefully through this session today, that we take a step forward, one step forward, to really having a gender inclusive and unbiased, an unbiased workplace in an unbiased world. Remember that International Women's Day is not about girl power. It's rather a call to action to, even for the male counterparts, that they have a part in this, in supporting the advocacy. And that we all have an important role to play in reaching equality. So, I welcome you to Gender Bender, an on-the-couch session on gender roles and breaking stereotypes, and it is an honor to introduce to you the rest of the speakers. So our panelists for today are individuals who have challenged gender norms and showed that we all win when we lean in together. Starting off with our 50-50 partner and an all-star dad. Let's all welcome Jelt Silva. So he will be sharing his experience as a hands-on father, as a supportive husband, and how he spends the rest of his day teaching his daughter. Homework, Filipino, Jet? Yeah. All right. Also, you may take a seat. We have our Managing Director, Steve Harris, as the Workplace MVP. So, we're going to hear from Steve, who, in the limited time that he's been here, has it been 1 year, 2 years, Steve?
You haven't done your homework.
That you do
Nearly 2 years. Yeah.
nearly 2 years. So, I still got the numbers right. Who I think is who best exemplifies, being a male partner, a male champion of change. Because we know that she works well with women, and he knows how to tap the talent of women and men in the workplace. And lastly, we do have a good friend of mine, an athlete and a CrossFit coach. So she is Miss Kristen Lim. So Kristen, she has been doing CrossFit for at least 3 years now. We almost started it at the same time, but now she's a coach. She has won a number of competitions here in the Philippines. In Asia, she represented the Philippines already. And just last year, she belonged to the CrossFit group that represented, and the only Philippine team, and she went to Wollongong in Australia for the Reebok CrossFit Open in 2017. So that's a big feat, especially for the CrossFit community here in the Philippines. And of course, me as the lead male champion of change. So again, I'll ask Miko to join us back on stage, and we will start the discussion.
Fred, it's Milo.
Oh, I said Miko, sorry, Milo.
That's my brother's name.
I'm nervous, by the way, sorry.
Me too. I'll try not to freak out, but Fred, if I do, you know the drill.
Run. Anyway. Okay, so. Yes, they are panelists for today, but. And you can be honest. Were you ever guilty of stereotyping and, putting people into gender roles? Probably, Jet, you can start.
Okay. Well, can you hear me? Okay. Wow, I feel really nervous today. It feels very odd for me being on the other end of the mic, so to speak. You've seen me host probably, well, some of you, and I think it's a bit different when you're on the receiving end being interviewed or something. Okay. Was I ever guilty? Fine, guilty as charged. Maybe not so often, but one of those few slips. Car cuts you off, or probably is hogging the lane, driving really slow at 20 on a 60. Fine, I'm guilty. I probably blurt out, and I'm sorry for this, I know I am. I'll say, black driver. Okay, the gender. I don't want to say it in front of everybody. But yeah, I'd say that. But probably another one just to add is, and this is what I say to my daughter. I have a 7-year-old whom I'd love to share more about later on. Whenever it's actually whenever we're home alone, just my daughter and I, and then I try my best to Google something. Last time I did so was to prepare French toast. And then she goes like, okay, after the first bite, you know, I think it was a Saturday, one of those Saturdays, it was just the two of us at home. First bite, she goes like, looks up at me and goes like, maybe we should have had pancakes instead. You know, after you put a lot of effort and whatnot, I go like, well, I'm sorry. You know, this is me, Daddy, trying my best to cook for you. Sorry, it's just really, you know, Mommy and the girls that, you know, probably really cook best. Sorry, Daddy's bad at this. Okay, let's go to McDonald's then. Okay, so that's me. Thank you.
How about Steve? Sure. Well, made me. You actually reminded me of a couple of incidences I've had in the car as well. I wasn't going to use that as an example, but I'll have to fess up as well. And not so much here because I don't drive as much, but certainly in Australia when I've had a few run-ins in the traffic, that has crossed my mind. That potentially it was a woman driving the car. I'm going to say that. You know, this is what we're about. We're about speaking our minds and being open and frank about stuff, and this stuff does happen. You know, so guilty as charged too. And you know, I do reflect on that, and what made me reflect on it was actually sitting in the car with my daughter one day driving. She was driving, she's licensed now, and been driving for a few months. And we had a bit of a run-in with another car. I said, oh my gosh, that would have been a woman driving that car. To my daughter. And my daughter would turn to me and say, you cannot say that. We drive just as well as you guys, and you guys drive just as badly as us if we are having a bad day. So that's very true. So she put me in my place, and I reflect on that ever since. So I certainly hold back. But the one that's really important for me that I wanted to share is related to Kristen's career, which is sport. And for those who've had the opportunity to go to Australia, male Aussie guys are very much into their sport, and they believe they're the only ones that can do sport. And you went to Wollongong, which, is for anybody who knows, is quite away from the big city of Melbourne, actually near Sydney. But in the main centre, so Melbourne and Sydney and Adelaide and so on, there tends to be historically a main dominance of men doing sport. And the culture is you do your sport and then you go to the bar afterwards and hang out and talk, you know, the stories of the event. But what's been happening over the last 5 to 10 years, most of which I've been overseas for, but I've seen remotely and I've seen it through my friends, is there's been a growing involvement of women getting involved in things like cricket and getting involved in Australian rules football, would you believe? And as recently as 3 years ago, the Australian Football League established a women's Australian Football League, which is a first, and you would have died if you'd been in bars and hanging out with guys at barbecues, hearing the commentary about the fact that women were now playing Australian rules football in a public arena. In fact, it's now televised. They should televise all the women's games, and they generally play in the spring, so which is now, leading up to the summer when the guys then have their season. But what stunned me the most was how stereotypical the guys are about the fact that, you know, why would I want to watch women playing Aussie rules? What do they know about kicking the ball straight? They can't kick the ball anywhere near as far as a guy, and they probably haven't got the strength, generally speaking, of the guys. So what's the fun in that? How can they beat each other up and do the things that guys like to watch? But anyway, I think the tide is turning, and I think the fact that you're seeing the Australian cricket team won the Women's World Cup last year and the year before, and now you're having the ratings on TV of women Australian football actually increasing significantly and really turning that stereotype away. And guys are now involved as watching the women play. Fantastic.
And that's good. I mean, Australia has always been in the forefront of, you know, driving equality, gender equality. Now, it's a different setting in the Philippines because we're very big on gender roles. You'd hear statements like, act like the man up, magpakalalaki ka, magpakababae ka, you know. Now, I'll focus on Kristen for a bit, especially during your early days in the sports. How did your parents react? I mean, not everyone know what CrossFit is, but if you ask people, they'd know, you'd see, you know, oh, it's heavyweight, it's a brutal workout. I imagine your parents were like, they went crazy when they heard you going into the sports.
Alright. Before I answer your question, I would also want to share my guilty stereotype. Just like Jet and Steve, during driving, I also attribute bad parking skills to female drivers, even if I myself am a female. So also, to share you another gender stereotype example, is when a male athlete beats me in a competition or during a workout at the box, I'd say it's because he's a guy. That's why he's stronger than me. So it could also be the other way around, that we stereotype guys that they're stronger than us because they have testosterone and then we don't. Right? So to answer your question, during my early days of doing CrossFit, my parents, when they found out, they didn't really want me to get too much into the sport because I'd end up getting too muscular. And then I would hear my mom at least once a week tell me that my body is getting ugly, it's getting bulky, and it doesn't look good, I won't find a partner, and that they think that I might be a lesbian, or she thought that I was a lesbian just because my body was manly. Right? So, and then eventually I had to really understand where she's coming from. She's from a generation where female are being stereotyped to be feminine, be too petite or mahinhin in Tagalog. But so I shouldn't really be mad at her for telling me those stuff because it's hard to let them understand given that that's where their generation was.
I guess, and it's a question for the three of you. Yes, we have been guilty on stereotyping, and you know, we've come a long way since, and we always repeat ourselves every day. We call ourselves out if ever we do that. But how do you think you can change the mindset of people around gender roles? Probably Steve, we can start in the context of the workplace. How do you do that, and how you advocate equality at work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And for me, I've never really overtly gone out of my way to distinguish necessarily on gender or bias in any kind of shape or form. And well before my days at ANZ, you know, my values, deep-rooted values from my family and my upbringing is we should all be equal, and you know, diversity and inclusion is just a way of life for us. So when I come to work, and you described, and we've talked a lot about bringing yourselves to work, I bring myself to work, and I bring those values to work, which is not to really distinguish, and I don't deliberately go out of my way to promote a woman in any different way to I would a guy. Just as much as, and I'll say it, you know, somebody with a disability and somebody without a disability in the office, I couldn't care less about that stuff. If I think the person has the knowledge and the skills that I need to get something done, then none of that matters, and that's the way I think about it. So there's probably no real kind of direct action. We do have, as you'll know, some metrics that we have to follow, and for Kristen's benefit, we have what we call women in management metrics. So we have to keep an eye on the fact that we have a good mix of women and men in management in our ranks, and that's because of a historical reason and perspective where traditionally it was always men in the more senior roles. So we do have targets. I don't think too much about those because here in the Philippines and certainly in China and most of our offshore locations, women seem to dominate the place, which is fantastic. And I don't think we have any issues here, certainly in Manila. But so you know, as I dive into that, when I think of initiatives or projects or things that we want to drive as a team here in Manila, you know, if it's a bunch of guys who show up for the project, or a bunch of girls, or a mixture of both, I really couldn't care less. If I know I have the right people involved, I know we're going to be successful. And we would generally, and the new way of thinking for us, which is about the new ways of working, is about giving others and everybody an opportunity. So male, female, doesn't matter, but rotate people through. So you guarantee by having that mindset that you'll get a good mix anyway. So that's how
you made a very good point, Steve, around values. And I mean, aside from anything else, that's the first thing that you bring to work, or you bring to wherever you are. Now, going back to Jed, how do you make sure, and how do you imbibe that into Diana's life? I mean, I know that after work you spend time, you go home right away, you spend time with Diana, do her homework. Tell us about that. What do you do after work, and how do you imbibe that and make sure that that value and the respect for other people is imbibed into her life?
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me? I told you guys I'm nervous. Okay. I can't even hear myself, but I do hope you hear me. So, just to give everybody maybe a bit of context, also what my background is, or how things are at home. My wife, so I've married for that's a pop quiz, around 8 years. Okay, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and my wife is also a career woman. She's been flying for a local airline company for 14 years now as a flight attendant, right? And coincidentally enough, she sent me this picture last night. I'll just read it out to you. Don't worry, it's without her. Okay. This is what it looks like, and what it says: flight attendant's husband. This was just last night. Yes, she's working now. No, I don't know when she'll be home. Yes, we're still married. And no, she's not imaginary. That pretty much sums up the relationship I have, or we have at home. Being married to a flight attendant, she's probably out like 3 to 4, even 5 days in a week. And when we say, Mommy's going to go to work, my kid knows she's going to be gone. Like, she's not going to come back at